Hey, Chase here, author of The Descendant, with another video explaining the science inside the science fiction. I have solicited opinions for topics, and while I have several of them saved for later, today's topic is not one of those solicited ideas. It is one of my own conceiving. This one is going to be a little longer than normal, and I apologize for that. But I've had a little more science to explain than usual, too. So please enjoy the B-roll video game footage in the background while I talk, as that's more interesting than my bearded face, and I don't have time or skills for fancy video editing with graphics and images and diagrams yet. Anyway, one of the things I've noticed when talking about the science parts of science fiction with other people is that they fail to think big enough. People are understandably used to thinking about technologies that apply to things that are to the scale of people. Such as cars and ships and cities. Today I want to talk about something on a grander scale. Planets. I want to talk about how someone could move a planet. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, this is a sober and realistic discussion. Please don't throw your tomatoes at me yet. Or do, because, they'll be on your computer screen and not mine. But at least hear me out, because it can be done, and I will explain how and why the physics let us do this. Let me start off with how not to move a planet. The first thing that comes to mind is a specific episode of the TV show Futurama, where the miscreant robot Bender accidentally solves the planet's worsening global warming problem by belching. But this is Bender. He's a huge alcoholic. He's a robot powered by alcohol. This isn't just a belch, this is an exhaust vent from his binge drinking at the end of the world party. The staggering exhaust from this belch is so powerful that it pushes the Earth further away from the Sun, increasing the orbital distance and lessening the Sun's effects on the planet, inadvertently sparing the world from a global warming disaster as everything gets just a little bit colder. After which, he has to live with all of the bridges he burned during the events that led up to this end of the world party. I know that's not relevant to the topic. I just love Futurama. Anyway, this is an excellent example of the wrong way to move a planet. But, for argument's sake, we'll say global warming is a valid reason to move a planet. Personal opinions aside, I don't want to get into the politics of whether global warming is or isn't a problem and what we should or shouldn't do about it. That's a political topic. This is a scientific topic. For the purpose of this discussion, let's say global warming is a problem and it needs fixed. It's not a problem that will kill us tomorrow or next week or even next year, but it is a problem that needs to get fixed and will continue to get worse until it does. Now, Bender's alcoholic exhaust vent could be compared to simply building a giant rocket engine fueled by alcohol. The robot, or not, is not important in the burning, just that a big fire producing rocket engine, or an array of such engines on the planet's surface, is not the way to move a planet, especially when the intent is to avoid the further effects of global warming. For starters, where would you get and store the incomprehensible amount of fuel required for such a massive and powerful and surely sustained rocket burn? Beyond that, how would a single engine, or a battery of engines, work in perfect coordinated harmony, be constructed to work flawlessly at such a scale? If the engines malfunctioned and exploded, it would be an explosion on a scale so massive that humanity's nuclear weapons would look like toys, albeit dirty ones. Even if fuel could be made and stored, and an engine or engines could be built of sufficient power and strength to perform such a feat, and of durability so that they don't just malfunction and explode, could the planet take it? The burn would have to be a slow, sustained thing. And it would probably, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not sure if it would have to burn a month or a year or, lifetimes. If you tried to move the Earth any distance, even something as relatively paltry as, say, a couple thousand kilometers, in any short amount of time, you can't, or at least, short from the human perspective, it would probably break the planet. Like I said, I'm not a genius. I can't even say the word. I'm not a genius mathematician, and I haven't worked this out. I'm just describing the principle to illustrate my point. But if we compare the Earth to an egg, for both have a hard outer shell, a crust, a liquid center, and a denser core. If the egg were to be placed on the head of a pneumatic piston, and the piston was actuated with sufficient speed, it's entirely possible the inertia of the egg's mass could exceed the surface tension of the shell, and the egg would shatter, spreading its liquid entrails over the head of the piston. In the Earth's case, the piston would be working in the opposite direction, and be mounted on the egg and acting against the space around the egg, rather than acting on the egg itself. But the effect would be the same, the egg would still break. Could the Earth be moved in that manner without the crust being broken? How would such a massive engine, or series of engines, be mounted around the planet's surface without crushing the surface beneath it with its massive thrust? Even if the thrust was low enough a force to be applied, and was applied slowly enough over a broad enough area to not break the shell, it would still be moving the planet and stirring that liquid inside the egg. And what would happen to the mantle if it got stirred so violently? What if the solid magnetic core doesn't stay in the center of the planet? Would all the volcanoes erupt? Would the Earth's magnetic fields change? Would the axis of rotation shift? All of the above? Would the center of gravity shift and we would be wobbling? Any one of those potentially, it could be an ecological disaster, at least on par with the effects of global warming. If the planet wasn't moved, and the mantle not stirred, and the core not jostled, and that's just on the inside of the planet. Let's not forget the surface of it, where we are. For, while we must think beyond the human perspective, we can't forget it either. We can reasonably agree that no single power plant could be constructed to generate enough thrust to move an entire planet, and that a massive array of engines would be needed to move our little rock further away from the sun. But these engines would have to be mounted somewhere, and so many of them, it would likely take up an entire continent. Think of all that heat, and the piping, and the infrastructure, and the mining, and the production, and the manufacturing, and the pollution, the machinery it would take, the pollution of the machinery that it would take just to build and install those engines, contributing hugely to global warming in an attempt to try and solve global warming, before even igniting the engines. And then what happens if they do ignite those engines, and all of them, they have, all that fuel, and even if they don't explode, and it doesn't break the crust, and they don't rearrange the Earth's guts and set off volcanoes and reverse the planet's polarity and destroy the magnetosphere, then we still have to contend with this huge, continent-spanning wall of flame burning hotter than the sun, right on the surface of our planet, for how many days or weeks it takes to move us. Who knows how long that is. You know what would happen to the sky? It would evaporate it. It would blast off the Earth's atmosphere on a continental scale. Let's say during the course of the burn, it only burned away half of the Earth's atmosphere, and ignoring all the other problems that I might have already mentioned or forgotten to mention, after you shut the engines down, not only will the remaining air be that much hotter, it will have to fill the gap on the one side of the globe where all the rest of the air got blasted off, spreading it out, dissipating it, making the air that much thinner. What if the air was only half as dense next week as it is right now while I'm telling you this? If there was any air left at all, I haven't done the math. I have no idea. I'm speaking in hypotheticals here for the sake of discussion. After all, I'm only a nerd. Now, for argument's sake, we still have half of our atmosphere. The air is only half as dense. Every living thing on the planet would die. If not immediately from suffocation, then in a matter of a few years or weeks or months afterwards, because there'd be huge holes in the ecosystem, and everything would collapse, and the most advanced life would be whatever amoebas and algae colonies were left, and the world would have to start all over, growing a new ecology without us, with less heat, with half the atmospheric density. And any one of those fates are possibly worse than the hypothetical global warming we're trying to avoid. And it's entirely possible they may all occur at once, if not then at least some of them in rapid succession. Needless to say, a giant rocket engine is not the correct way to move a planet. I'm sorry, Bender. So, now, instead, let me talk about the right way to move a planet, because it can be done safely and slowly, but it's a multi-step plan and a slow process to rescue us from a slow death of asphyxiation. First, there's lots of talk, even now, about mining asteroids and comets from, out there in space. Like, right now. Real talk about that. And that's where we need to start. That's what we need to do first. Not just because it's the easiest thing, the most achievable thing that we can do right here, right now, with our technologies. We need to get out there and drag back space rocks and chunks of deep space ice from out in the solar system and drop them into the Earth's number 2 Lagrange point, between the Earth and Mars, away from the Sun. Once those rocks and comets and such is there, we can mine them out. And this will give us raw materials and water that we need to support the Earth's infrastructure and population. And doing that, all of that mining, machinery, and all the refining and whatnot involved in that mining won't be here on Earth. It'll be on the asteroids and comets and whatever we pull into the L2 Lagrange point. So we can do all that without contributing to global warming. I know that doesn't solve it, but I'm getting there, bear with me. Now, with all these hollowed out asteroids and comets and such, whatever Earth-bound debris we can drag into this L2 point, we can colonize them. We build O'Neill cylinders inside these hollow asteroids, give the miners and workers a place to live, a shelter that a shelter in a place that shields them from cosmic radiation. This makes the man-to-machine part of the mining operation that much easier. They don't have to leave Earth to get out there, because they're already there. And it also gets all of those people off of Earth. That many more bodies and machines and cars and homes and factories that aren't here on Earth, contributing to the pollution. And I know that doesn't solve it either, and is instead just a benefit, another side effect. The real purpose for dropping the asteroids and comets and space stations and mines and O'Neill cylinders out there is because they have mass. And anything with mass has gravity. And what gravity pulls on is the fabric of space. Fabric is an excellent example of how gravity works. So let me go on a little tangent here, but you'll understand why in a moment. First, think back to the last time you put clean sheets on your bed, and you made your bed. I mean really made your bed, not a wrinkle in the fabric, sheets tucked in under the mattress and pulled so tight you can bounce a quarter off of it. Now, Mr. Murphy is going to come along and demonstrate some physics to us by dropping a bowling ball on your freshly made bed. That bowling ball has mass, and that mass is going to sink into the mattress, stretching and deforming the fabric of the sheet, dimpling it, creating a bowl, a depression around the bowling ball at its center. Now, because your fresh bed is ruined and has to be remade, it is of no consequence if a golf ball is also added to this demonstration. The golf ball also has mass, and will also deform the sheet on top of the mattress. But with less mass, it has less gravity, and less effect on the fabric of space, of the sheet. So the dimple, the bowl, the well, whatever you want to call it, the deformed space under the less massive golf ball will be less deformed, because less mass, therefore less gravity. If the golf ball is too close to the bowling ball, the golf ball will roll down into the bowl, into the gravity well made by the more massive bowling ball, because it has more gravity. All objects have gravity proportional to their mass. I've personally seen an experiment to prove this. A normal A-frame stepladder was used. I think it was an 8-foot model. And from its apex, a tiny plastic bead was dangled on a very fine thread, or it might have actually been fishing line, I don't remember. But this bead was suspended from the ladder and hung roughly an inch above the tile floor. And a mark was made on the floor, a tiny dot to indicate the point directly under the bead. Then next to the bead... Thank you, security and maintenance. I'm not going to reconnect my external hard drive. Anyway. So this bead is suspended under the ladder, and it's roughly an inch above the floor, and we used a Sharpie and made a mark on the floor. Next to the bead, we deposited a massive block of lead. I think it was 100 kilograms, if memory serves right. They had to use a hand truck to move it into the classroom. It was huge. It's been a while. Anyway, with this much more massive block placed so close to the bead, which had so little mass and was suspended as nearly unhindered as could be made in such conditions, a second mark under the center of the bead was made on the floor, because the bead had moved, and it had moved a measurable amount towards the lead block. It was a small amount, only 2 or 3 millimeters, but it was. It had moved. It was a measurable, tangible proof that objects don't have to be spinning or orbiting or whatever to have gravity. By existing, by having mass, they generate gravity. So, back to these asteroids, mines, colonies, and so forth. They have mass, and as we haul more asteroids into orbit and mine them and colonize them, they have more mass. And the more mass, the more gravity. The more gravity, the more they pull on Earth, pulling it away from the sun. I don't expect the Earth to move 1,000 or even 100 kilometers with that method. I don't expect it to move at all. But it will help. It will make it easier for the next step. I will explain. But before I do, I want to point out again that all the while, all of this mass that we're dropping into the L2 Lagrange point, all that material will make the job of mining and living, it makes living space for us. And all of that mining and manufacturing and housing, all those colonies can be erected without causing further harm and stress on the Earth. There won't be more global warming, pollution, stresses added here to the Earth, because it'll all be out there in this man-made asteroid field. All right. Now, the second half of this plan is shields. Big solar panels put up in space on the other side of the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Sun. This will also have multiple direct and indirect effects. Directly, it will cast shade, blocking some of the sun's rays like on a cloudy day, helping cool the Earth. But these are also made of solar panels. Solar panels that will make a lot of electricity. And lots of things can be done with electricity. It would serve 2 primary purposes. Firstly, to run ion engines to keep the solar panels in place for the duration. And we'll come back to that too. Secondly, I propose to shoot lasers at the Earth. I know, sounds crazy. Lasers make heat. That's why they pop balloons and make popular sci-fi weapons. But this heat is energy. And with receptors down on the Earth's surface, preferably in already hot and barren desert places, all that heat energy can be absorbed as electrical power. It can be done, it has already been done. Beaming power from one location to another with lasers has been done. And now, with these lasers beaming all this energy from these huge orbital solar panels down to Earth, we have all of that free electricity here on Earth. And that many power plants don't need to be run. And all of that can be shut down and will be that much less stress on the environment because of the associated pollution reduction. That's only another indirect side effect. The lasers can be used to propel objects. Oh, great. Somebody's sending me a text. I'm sorry, I'm busy. Anyway, we start building a Dyson swarm of laser-shooting solar shields and use them not only to power, but to propel the Earth, to push it. Remember those ion engines I mentioned earlier? The ones that hold the solar panels in place. Those give the lasers something to push against. This push-pull configuration combined with the cumulative effects of all the new habitat and resource and power, without contributing more pollution to Terra herself, and bam! That's how you slowly, but safely, move a planet and save her occupants from their own wasteful and destructive technologies, as humanity lasts longer and builds more of those wasteful and destructive technologies. To recap, we have the mass of this swarm, this pile of asteroids, drug into one of the Lagrange points. This mass is pulling the Earth out, away from the sun, with the added benefit of providing water and raw materials and housing. I gotta turn off all these notifications. This is ridiculous. Anyway. And then inboard, at the other Lagrange point between the sun and the Earth, we have all of these solar shields casting shade, generating electricity, and pushing us, making things that much easier. And working in tandem could, albeit extremely slowly, but over the course of a long time, decades, centuries maybe, they will move the Earth ever so gently farther away from the sun to reduce the amount of heat we get from the sun and solve the global warming problem. And then it would also be pretty easy to just remove some of the solar shields or shrink some of them down so they cover less area, or shut off some of the lasers, or push some of those asteroids out of the Lagrange point so that their mass isn't pulling on it, and stop affecting the Earth. Alright, now, before the close of this, I've got one more rant to add to this tirade. I know, I do my best to stay completely neutral on all topics, and I speak only on scientific matters, but this is one instance where I cannot abide by that, and I must speak my own opinion. And it isn't even about global warming or pollution. It is for the various reasons I mentioned above that I think SpaceX and Elon Musk and what they are doing and the people and the organizations involved in that is the most important thing any man or company could be doing at this given moment. I truly believe that by single-handedly I truly believe that Elon Musk may single-handedly be responsible for saving our species, for making humanity a multi-rock race, for building the ships and the technology and the infrastructure to make operations of that scale, like I've already been talking about, not just a pipe dream, but within our grasp, something we can have sober and reasonable conversations about accomplishing. And it doesn't even have to be that specifically, but just the advancement of technology and ability. Lots of people hate Elon, and for that matter, anyone else with more wealth than them. That whole, eat the rich principle thing. And I could not disagree more with that sentiment. I couldn't disagree more strongly. Firstly, because the people who have the wealth had the ideas and the business sense and the drive to build the companies and the systems and the institutions that made the wealth. It's theirs. They earned it. And I know some of them are born into that. They had rich parents. But once you get to that level and you have that much wealth, it's like running a small country. You can't be stupid and maintain that kind of wealth. I don't think anyone has the right to take it away from them either. And that it's not fair that the super rich get to use all of these tax holes and loops and such, and people complain about that. And I'm going to disagree with that too. those loops and loopholes, the loopholes are there and can be used by anyone who can find them. Just because us normal folks don't have the wealth to find or fund the experts to find or make those loopholes, or even the right kind of assets to be used to exploit those loopholes. It's not their fault. Getting rich isn't just about collecting money in your mattress. It takes as much coordination and diversity, as I mentioned earlier, as running a small country when you get to that level of wealth. These are not dumb people, whether they're born into it or they make the fortunes themselves. And if they have made the fortunes themselves, they have all the more respect for it, in my opinion. On top of that, let's say for argument's sake, that it was common practice to redistribute the wealth, and anyone who net worthed over, say, 100 million, I'm just picking that arbitrarily, anyone who net worthed over 100 million had everything over that amount taken from them and given out to the masses. That would destroy the incentive to earn more than a fixed amount of money. It would cap the market, and with that cap, innovation and creation would die. There'd be no drive for it anymore. There'd be no push to create or innovate or invent beyond what it took to make that fixed 100 million income. Anything more expensive or more elaborate than that would not be done. It would be destroying everything beyond its limitations, because there would be no more incentive to go there and get it, to find it or create it. And without that creativity, without that drive, without that funding, SpaceX wouldn't be here. They wouldn't be doing what they have been doing in the last handful of years. They've redefined the entire space industry and made a mockery of everything. I repeat, everything else that is trying. Blue Origins, for example, just keeps trying to sue their way into orbit because they don't know how to do it. Because they, lost to SpaceX for the moon landing. SpaceX is building brand new, more efficient Raptor engines for their ships for 1/10 of the cost of what NASA is taking from the taxpayers to refurbish old space shuttle engines that were old news in the 80s. So, his internet memeing and trolling aside, I think Elon Musk and SpaceX are the most important things to the human race, and their developments and innovations and new technologies and funding may well save the human race from an extinction of our own devising, whether that be some sort of economic or geographical or environmental or even just intercontinental war kind of tragedy. Sorry, personal rant over. People need to think bigger, not just on personal human scale, but on a galactic scale, because we can move planets, we can move stars, and the physics is there. We just have to do the work for the technology to catch up. And at face value, I can easily understand why people don't like the super wealthy and the massive corporations, but we need them in order to fund and develop those technologies and methods, because they're massive, hugely expensive undertakings, and no single country can do it. We must be unified in purpose as a species in order to accomplish these things. Thanks for listening to my rant, and I hope my opinion didn't get in the way. I know I kind of detracted from my physics at the end there. If you learn something, or you know something, and I didn't mention it, or you have, a further elaboration to prove or disprove anything I said, or you feel like doing the math to figure out if we'd have half an atmosphere or a quarter of an atmosphere or none of it at all after running giant rocket engines, feel free to correct me down in the comments below, and I would love to know more. Regardless of, me being right or wrong doesn't mean anything to me. I just want to know. I want facts. So please correct me if I'm wrong in feeding people misinformation, or prove me right. I don't care which. Let's just get it right. My published book, The Descendant, is available on Amazon, and the link will be down in the description below. And while it doesn't have anything so extreme as moving planets, it's only the first book in the series, and if you stick around for the rest of them, you'll see how extreme it gets. Because it does get crazy. I appreciate your time, and leave a comment, give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Probably without a personal rant. I want to stick to the science. I just didn't see a way around that conversation without explaining that we have to think bigger than countries in order to achieve these goals and save ourselves as a species. Anyway, party hardy sci-fi nerds.